Hi there, Morphy here. I'm here today with Mindy, Sassy Heathen, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. I've got lots of talking points, but unfortunately, due to some sort of error with my email sending, she doesn't have the talking points, so this should be interesting.
Yay,
Welcome, Mindy.
Yes. It's all a surprise, the way I like to live life.
Yes. Well, anything can happen and does happen here on the Morphy Show.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I wanted to ask you about, firstly, I've watched the video on your. In fact, I've watched every video on your channel now.
I appreciate that.
But there's the one where you told your story, and if you could give us a brief version of that, that would be great.
Well, it's really not that exciting, to be honest, as everyone else has their deconversion stories. But I was brought up with no religion whatsoever. And when I got married and my marriage was kind of on the brinks, I thought going to church might help us and might find a way of connecting with other people. So I did that for 2 years and didn't really believe in anything that they told. I guess the easiest way to describe it is when I went there, I felt like I was faking it and I wasn't getting what everybody else in church was doing. And I felt like a fraud. I felt like I was lying to everybody, and that didn't make me feel good. So I ended up stopping, and I tried being a witch or a Wiccan for a couple of years. And I have to admit, the aesthetic of being a Wiccan was really cool. But it was, again, I found that I couldn't believe. I just couldn't force myself to believe in something supernatural, even though I really, really wanted to. So I came out of that. And I went through like a really, really hard period of my life, and I ended up meeting my future husband, and I got pregnant. So I got wrapped up in that for a couple of years. And then we came down to Pennsylvania to meet my in-laws, and they introduced me to a church down here, which was kind of like, it was very similar to the church I had gone at home. And they are very devout Christians, and, like they at dinner and all that. So I thought, for their sake, I'm going to give it a try. And it was the exact same thing. Like, I loved being at the church. It was a wonderful atmosphere. My daughter really enjoyed going there. And I just felt out of place, basically. I couldn't find that, raise your hands to the roof type of belief. And I felt like I was in the wrong place. So when I stopped going, my father-in-law gave me a study Bible, and he suggested reading the Bible and kind of doing my own research and doing my own thing. And when I started doing that, I ended up, getting on the path of being an atheist. So the more reading I did and the more research I did, the less and less I found a reason to believe or to even search for that belief. And that's where I am now. I started watching The Atheist Experience, and Talk Heathen actually was the very first one that I watched with Eric Murphy, and that led me to Matt Dillahunty on The Atheist Experience. And I started debating on Facebook groups and getting involved with Kenny Bomber, and that was the very first time I had been on camera with anybody to debate anything. And I started searching for other atheists on YouTube, wondering if maybe there was a community out there. And I found Neil, the 604 Atheist. And then the atheist pastor tweeted about my channel. And Twitter is something that I had never really kind of gotten into before. And when he tweeted about my channel, I was like, oh. So then I followed him back, and the next thing you know, my whole Twitter list is full of atheists that want to talk to me, and I'm watching other channels, and it's just kind of like exploded for me. I'm like, why didn't I use Twitter sooner? I didn't know. And then here we are today doing this interview.
Okay. You were saying that you felt that you were the only one at the church that wasn't really into it. Do you think that's actually the case, or do you think there's a number of people there who are just there for the community and who don't really believe it?
Looking back now, I know that I probably wasn't the only one, but it felt like I wasn't the only one at the time. So, I mean, I would stand there during worship, because churches nowadays, they have like a full rock band up on stage and they've got the lights going, and it's like a Christian concert every time you go to church on Sunday. And I would look around and everyone would like either have their hand on their chest or have their hands up in the air, and I'd be like, I don't know, like, what am I missing? It seemed like everybody else was into it except me. So either the other people are just, pretending a lot better than I did. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting that they have to have, this rock music and a light show and all these things that actually, just from a purely secular point of view, would play on your emotions in order
I think bring in the younger crowd.
Right. Okay. I was just thinking that they're trying to actually inject some emotion when, there isn't any coming from the God because it's actually not there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I mean, when I look at my in-laws' church and how it's a much, I can't remember what denomination they are, but it's a very older environment. So it's actually in a church and they sing the old hymns from the hymn book, and, and they appeal to a much older generation. Whereas the other church that I went to was more like, the head pastor at that church was my age and had a wife and had young kids. So I think that a lot of these newer churches are trying to get that vibe in, that going to church is cool and there's all these things that we offer, and, to kind of appeal to the younger generations to get them to come to church.
Yeah, it probably won't be long before we see that pastor as an atheist on Twitter, apologizing for all the people he converted and stuff. It's interesting you said about a study Bible, because I got myself a skeptic annotated, and I find that I don't actually read the text of the Bible. I just read the skeptic notes down the side.
I didn't actually read a whole lot of the notes. Like I sat down with the intention to like really read the Bible and go through it. Like if you look at Genesis, I've sat there with different color highlighters and I've written all over like all my questions. And then when I got through Genesis, I was like, am I going to really sit here through this whole Bible and pick it apart? And I kind of lost interest. I'm like, no, that's just way too much work. There's too many questions. What's the point? Like I have read the Bible, just not as in much detail as I had intended to when I started. And then I realized it was too big. I had too many other things to do and I didn't bother.
Yeah, it's interesting. A few years ago, somebody bought me a book by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was the chief rabbi in the UK. And I just gave up after 18 pages because I'd written more than 18 pages of notes about, all the fallacies that he was using and stuff. It's so bad.
Yeah. There comes a point where you just have to say, oh, this is enough. It's too much work. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not going to change my mind.
Okay, Mindy, I have to say, well, first of all, I'm going to see whether or not I forgive you at the end of this talk, because I sat through 2.5 hours of Kenny Boma yesterday, and it's 2.5 hours I'm not going to get back, and it probably shortened my life a good deal. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I need to thank you because I was actually watching that while I was on my cross trainer, and I got so angry that I actually broke all of my exercise records. So
that's good though. I'm glad we did you a favor.
It's like when you hear people say that they wanted to punch the screen. Well, I was there and I was, on the cross trainer and just going like twice as hard as normal. It was, yeah. So anyway, I wanted to talk a bit about Kenny and about the debate that you tried to have, because he spoke for about 95% of the time.
Oh yeah, that was a rough time. Like we had originally met on a debate group that I text debate in Facebook, And he showed up and joined that group and every day would start spamming his stream. And anytime someone tried to engage him in the group to debate, he'd be like, no, you need to come on my show. No, no, I don't debate here. You need to come on my show. So he was just basically trying to advertise for himself. And it upset a lot of people. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, whatever, I'm going to go and I'm going to see what this is all about. And that was the very first video that I posted on my channel, was me basically going through and the sections really that I talked about. So that first time I talked to him for about 3 hours, and I don't personally know a whole lot about Islam. So I had a lot of questions and I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity to talk to somebody that, maybe knows what they're talking about. So I spent a good portion of that very first call just asking a lot of questions. And it got to a point where I started questioning what they were telling me. And from my end, it felt like I was starting to get ganged up on, because I was the only atheist on the panel and there was 4 other Muslims. And when the conversation got heated, they all started talking over me. They all, they would, if they didn't like my answer to something, then they would start just repeating the question, hoping that my answer would be different. And I got very overwhelmed. And at the very end of that first call, Kenny's like, well, I don't know, maybe you're just tired, but you're being unreasonable. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. So we had this back and forth for a few weeks on Facebook, where he was attacking me and calling me a liar about the way I described how the call went. And I was like, okay, how about we try again? And he's like, well, come on my show. And I said, okay, I'll do a one-on-one with you and we'll debate what's the topic. So I actually had a notebook and I had all kinds of notes about, what I was going to debate and, my rebuttals to what I thought he was going to say. And he started the conversation off with, well, what's your problem with me? And it kind of just spiraled downhill from there, because I'm not an experienced debater. That was my very first actual debate. So I know I bombed that hardcore because I was inexperienced. But he also really threw me off because he really made it, instead of debating a topic, he was making it very personal. And there were a lot of personal attacks in there. And we got really, really off track of what I was trying to say. And at the end, I was like, okay, well, you know what, I've had enough. This is it. We got to be done. And that was the last time I debated him. And we had a back and forth on Facebook after that for a little while, really disagreeing. And I can't really say at what point it kind of turned around, but he was being trolled on his stream on YouTube. And I went on to talk to this Christian person who was attacking him, because I had my own questions and I was curious, and we developed a friendship between that. So, I mean, from there, we're friendly, and I ask him questions. He actually came on stream and apologized for the way that he talked to me and the way that he treated me. And yeah, we've become friends since then. Ethan, the friendly neighborhood atheist, would be proud of me for that.
Yeah, shout out to Ethan in case he watches this, because he's great, and I'm hoping to go back on his show in a couple of weeks' time as well, when I've got a bit of time off. Yeah, so it's good that it's come out okay with Kenny, because I was just so annoyed watching that yesterday, and he kept calling you an atheist white woman, and I was wondering which one of those 3 descriptors annoyed him the most. And being Islam, I was thinking woman probably did.
That's the impression that I got when I first started interacting with him on Facebook. I thought, maybe it's because I'm female and I'm challenging his beliefs. Maybe that's what he takes so offense to. But yeah, I don't know. I can't really say, because I was never really rude to him. And I tried my best to be polite, and, he went out with all the name calling and all that stuff. And to be fair, there were some people that were atheists that I'm friends with that were less than nice to him. But sorry, that's my daughter in the background being very loud.
I think you conducted yourself incredibly well and stayed very, very calm for over 2 hours while he was just spewing stuff at you and accusing you of interrupting him when it was constantly him interrupting you. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I could have done that. And it's one of the reasons I'm not really keen to have conversations with believers, because, first of all, I'm not going to put up with that. And then secondly, unlike people like Eric Murphy, who seem to have a lot of patience for people phoning in, although he's losing his patience with people misquoting Darwin at the moment. And,
yeah.
So he seems to have a lot of patience. Yeah, they phone in and I just go, no true Scotsman fallacy, argument from ignorance. I just immediately say what fallacy they're using.
Mm-hmm. When I first started this, I had the intentions of, getting into debate and finding theists to talk to. And I thought, okay, well, this is a good opportunity for me to practice and kind of, get my bearings. And I've since changed my mind. But I mean, I felt like I did a terrible job with that debate. But I mean, I've been told by people that have seen it that I did all right. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll leave it up then.
Yeah, your points came across calmly. There's a couple of things that I wanted to dig into from it, actually, because he kept wanting to talk about whether atheism or Islam had the best ideas for society and so on. Mm-hmm. And you tried to point out to him that atheism is a position on one thing and one thing only, whether or not you accept that a God exists. And he just seemed to refuse to accept that.
Yeah.
And then he kept asserting, well, if atheism has no answers and Islam has answers, then Islam must be better. Right. Now, my take on that is not if Islam has all the wrong answers. And we've seen all these videos, we're all aware, and I'm sure Kenny is as well, of women being attacked in Iran for not wearing a veil or, any sort of headscarf. We know how women are treated throughout the Islamic world, and anything that has that effect of 50% of your population effectively being second-class citizens has to be a bad idea, in my view.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Whether or not it comes from a God. And so, what's better, a worldview that has no answers or a worldview that gives you the wrong answers? I don't know if you're aware, but Sam Harris once described Islam as being the motherlode of bad ideas.
Well, I don't know if you watched The Daily Atheist when he interviewed a woman that had left Islam. She was an ex-Muslim and she was born and raised in Canada, and some of the stories that she told us.
Yasmin Mohammed.
Sorry?
Was it Yasmin Mohammed?
No, her name was like Zara or Zahara, something like that.
I've heard of her too.
So bad not remembering her full name, but yeah, it was just recently, just a few weeks ago. But she had some pretty eye-opening stories because I'm Canadian and I didn't even know that things like that happened in Canada. So I mean, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, absolutely. I have listened to Yasmin Mohammed a few times, and she was actually married to somebody who was involved in the 9/11 attack.
Oh wow!
And didn't know about it. He was brutal with her apparently, and there were plenty of beatings and things like that. I saw something the other day. There was a video on Twitter of a Muslim man on a train, probably somewhere in the Middle East, punching his wife. And everybody around was just like, just normal daily events. And so, I can't see how that type of worldview is better for society. And you've just got to look at how people live in a lot of those countries. They're the least progressive. They're living, in the Iron Age when they don't need to in many ways.
Yeah. I think because Kenny is an American Muslim, so he has a lot more freedoms, and from what I see from him, he lives a different religion than what is put across from what it happens actually in the Middle East. Or like Zara said on The Daily Atheist, that a lot of this stuff is done in secret and we don't know about it. So how much are we really seeing? We're seeing what they want us to see, basically. So we don't know if that's what's really going on.
Were you around on social media when we had the Rahaf incident a couple of years back?
No, I don't think so.
There was a young lady, I think she was about 17 or 18, had fled from Saudi. It's a couple of years ago, so I don't remember, but there was a hashtag Save Rahaf was a big thing at the time, and she'd sort of barricaded herself in an airport, and they were going to deport her. back to Saudi, and she didn't want to go back because she's an apostate, and her parents were probably going to kill her and all this sort of stuff. And I don't have a huge following on Twitter, but I was sort of hashtagging in, people like, Seth Andrews and Sam Harris and all these people that have like thousands and thousands of views and getting them to retweet it, or trying to get them to retweet it. Well, they were on board anyway, I guess, not necessarily through my action, but everybody was doing it. And in the end, I think she's moved to Canada. I think she actually lives in Canada now. Yeah. But, this is the type of stuff that comes out of there, And frankly, listening to your apologists, your Islamic apologists talking to you yesterday, their apologetics is so weak compared to Christian apologetics. And I guess that's what comes out of a situation where you could just silence people who dissent from your view.
Yeah. Yeah. Christian apologists really scare me because I'm like, I don't know how to handle those arguments. But I mean, when it comes to dealing with the Islam ones and the interactions that I've had, I don't have that same fear, I guess, of actually dealing with them, because it's just they kind of seem to just go over what I'm saying to them when we talk about that, and who cares?
I think the Christian apologists are easy enough to handle if they just throw one thing at you, but they tend to gish gallop. And will tend to try and hit on the one thing that you don't know very much about. And it just seems to me that in order for them to argue what they're saying, they don't have to be experts in anything. And in order to refute it, we've got to have a little bit of knowledge in everything.
Yeah. And I just don't feel like I'm at that level where I have enough knowledge to be able to take that on. I'm getting there because I'm trying to soak in as much as I possibly can. It's just I am not in a place where I could take on an apologist right now.
Yeah. I often think when I've engaged with them on Twitter that, there's things I could have said better, or, I think to myself a couple of days later, I should have said this, or I should have said that. And that's why I don't necessarily want to get into a debate, because I sometimes think of the argument against it a couple of days later, or sometimes I have to read up.
Oh, I do that all the time. Like, oh my God, why did I think of that at the time? Too late. Hindsight's 2020.
Coming back to Kenny, he was committing a lot of fallacies himself, obviously.
Oh yeah.
But accusing you of making them. So at one point you were talking about the embryos and the 3 veils of darkness, or whatever they were on about. And you're right, it's not exceptional knowledge. A lot of these people kept animals as well as, their own families having children. And, I could be wrong here, and this might just be apocryphal because I haven't actually looked it up. But isn't it called a caesarean section because Julius Caesar was born that way?
Yes. Yes, I believe so.
So, it's not like C-sections have never been done. And I don't think you need a microscope to actually see what's going on there. So they were talking complete rubbish about that, I felt. I don't think any of the knowledge in the Quran is in any way exceptional. But when you said that, they were saying that you were making a positive claim. But they'd made the claim first, so they were making a positive claim. And they were saying, where's your evidence for that claim? And yet earlier on, Kenny had been making positive claim after positive claim after positive claim about his God with no evidence whatsoever. So he was doing exactly the same as he was accusing you of.
That's something I've noticed with a lot of theists across the board do. It's not something that's just exclusive to Kenny. It's just I have text debated with a lot of theists, and it seems to be a reoccurring theme where, they're quick to jump on the fallacies that you might say, but as soon as they make one, oh, absolutely not. No, I wouldn't do that. So it's very one-sided sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. There was something else. I'm glad it's worked out well for you anyway. And no, that was it. It was just the fact that he was still the one making the positive claim. And then when you you didn't counterclaim, but he was saying it was exceptional knowledge and could only have come from a God. And he was saying, no, I don't think it's exceptional. I think people would have observed that. And then he was saying, you're making a positive claim, but all you were doing was was putting a counterpoint to his positive claim.
Yeah.
It was frustrating, but
It was extremely frustrating. That's why I won't debate him again. I mean, I've come to the conclusion that you can have a different belief system from someone and still be their friends and still talk to people. And that's why I've kind of become friends with him, is because I'm observing, I'm watching, I'm asking questions, I'm interacting. But because he right now, I don't know if you've watched any of his streams or whatever, but he's convinced that I'm an atheist for now. He's actually said that several times, that I'm an atheist for now, because he thinks I believe he thinks that he's going to be able to convert me. It's never going to happen, but it's interesting the way he thinks that that I'm going to suddenly change my mind, or he's going to be able to convince me. But it's good that we've been able to be on friendly terms. I don't like being, trying to think of the right word. I don't like not liking someone or having that animosity between people. That bothers me.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you're unlikely to be convinced by his argument that God made the oxygen so that you could breathe.
Right. Yeah. He's never going to be able to convince me his God is real, but I don't mind being friends with him.
That's so good. And as you say, he actually does go out doing a fair bit of good. He does a lot of charity work, feeding the homeless and all that sort of stuff, which is fine. It's just that you wouldn't want Canada or the US to actually become like Iran.
No, not at all.
Absolutely.
Not at all. I wouldn't. But I mean, I'm not going to tell him that the reason he is going out and doing these things is because he feels like his God is compelling him to do that. And I mean, if he's not hurting anyone and he's going out and he's helping people that need to be helped, then you know what? I'm fine with that. He's doing good in the world right now, and that's good.
The one issue that I have with that, and it's something that I see a lot more with Christianity, because like yourself, I'm a culturally Christian atheist, although I was never in any way a believer. I've been an atheist all my life, but I come from a culturally Christian background, and my parents were, well, my mum at least was sort of a believer. I find that a lot of the moderate theists will always side with their fellow Christians about some issues. I mean, I'm sure that's not happening at the moment with Black Lives Matter and things like that. But we've got a situation now in the US where you've got, Mike Pence as vice president, and whenever I've watched the Handmaid's Tale, I've always thought that it could be subtitled "Mike Pence's America." Yeah, and they've got all these. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I spoke to Clint Haycock on here a little while ago, and I've got Tim Sledge as well coming on, and these guys know what's been going on with all this Christian homeschooling and all these Christian colleges and getting people into government, and we've got all these right-wing judges now, and you've got all this sort of stuff going on. And I think unfortunately the more moderate Christian is going to say, oh, well, they're Christians, not realizing that they definitely don't want to live in the world that these people want to create, which would be like the Handmaid's Tale. And that really, on a lot of issues, they should be siding with the non-believer. And that's what worries me about somebody like Kenny. He may be a nice guy who's going out there doing lots of work for the homeless and all this sort of stuff because of his religion. But he'd side with the Sharia law when it really came to it. So
he absolutely believes that Sharia law should be implemented in the States. Absolutely. The idea of Sharia that he has in his mind and the way he explains it, he doesn't think that it would be bad for the citizens of the US. He thinks that it should be under Islamic law because that would make it better for society.
Okay. So it would make it better for girls who want an education to get, whatever, shot in the head or acid thrown in their faces or whatever.
I've been told that Islam actually values its women and actually holds them in higher regard than men, and it doesn't make sense when they tell us that, and then we see what's in the world. But then when we question that, we're told, well, that's just Islamophobe, and that's just, propaganda. It's not real. They're just trying to make Islamists look bad and Muslims look bad. I mean, little voices. She's like, she broke her toy. She's like, Mommy, fix it. But she's being very quiet, very polite. There you go, babe.
There we go, fixed. So when they speak like that, though, that honestly gets my back up quite a bit.
It feels very dishonest, yes.
Yeah, because what they're saying is, "Oh, we value our women," but it's like, hold on, the women are actually people in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The trouble I find with a lot of religion is it wants to specify gender roles and other types of roles as well. And to me, isn't the best thing for society, and I know this is kind of humanism, not atheism, but to me, the best thing for society is that everybody should have equal opportunities. It doesn't matter what their gender is, what their race is, what their sexual orientation is. Everybody should just have equal opportunity.
Absolutely. I see that a lot in Christianity too. The way that they view women. Like there's a trend on Twitter, I believe it's Twitter, called the trad wife, about women and being in like traditional wife roles, basically being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen because that's what your husband wants you to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you come across the transformed wife?
Oh yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan of hers. Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah, I couldn't be further from being a fan of hers. It's just, if you ever get a chance to watch it, there's a channel called Veritas Voices, and it's done by my friend Lilith, who's been on here a few times, and a guy called Revelation. He is on Twitter. His tweets are always worth watching out for, because his arguments are always so good and so clear. And they do an episode every now and again where they call it Tweets from Batshit Believers. And she features so heavily in that. She's virtually every time they do one of those, she's on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you watch, he's Jimmy Snow now, but he used to be Dear Mr. Atheist. He's covered her quite a few times.
Yeah, he's
that's
good.
actually originally how I found her.
Yeah. So, okay, Mindy. So it's probably enough about our friend Kenny, or your friend Kenny. The next one was about a tweet that you sent about theists making assumptions. It's interesting that you make so many assumptions about what we think, feel, and believe. Have you actually ever spoken to an atheist? Now, it's interesting that you tweeted that out, because I've never encountered this situation where theists start telling me what I think and what I believe.
I get it a lot, actually, and it's a lot from the Facebook debate groups I'm in, where they'll say, well, you really believe in God. Deep down you believe in God, but you're just pretending. So a lot of them like to assume that, we say we don't believe in God because we just want to go out and sin. That's it. That's all. So, and they don't actually listen to what we say to them when we try and explain, why we don't believe and all of that. But it's like, it kind of all goes over their head and they're like, nope, you really believe in God. Like, they can't understand that somebody else believes something different than them. It seems like it's very complicated for them to understand what an actual atheist is. And I wish that some of them would just sit down and just, instead of talking at us and telling us what we think and feel, actually listen. That's all. Just listen for once.
Yeah. I was actually, being sarcastic when I said I'd never encountered this, because, you encounter it all the time. And I actually thought of trying to formulate at one stage what I would call presuppositionalist atheism, which is that, everybody in the world knows that the God concept is complete bollocks, but some people choose to pretend to believe in one.
I've actually seen someone try and use that argument before, and yeah, it flops. They don't get it. They really don't get it, and it's a shame.
I just thought it might be funny for our side rather than instructive for their side.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's hilarious on our side, but that it's a complete flop on their end because they just don't get it.
Yeah. But I've actually had people sort of turn around to me and say, you know, oh, this is not a good idea because you're just using fallacies, blah, 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 blah. And they just don't see that really I'm just sort of putting my tongue in my cheek. And, you know, if you've watched any of my channel, especially my 5-minute rants, you know, I try to be a bit, you know, tongue in cheek. And I guess, you know, I'm a failed comedian because I'd really love to be a comedian, but I'm not that funny.
I don't think I'm funny at all. So we're in the same boat there, except I just don't want to get up on stage and be told I'm not funny when I already know I'm not funny.
Yeah, I'd love to actually be funny. It's just my sense of humour that, you know, to sort of, you know, pretend to them, you know, to set up this whole presuppositional framework and, you know, get a script to go with it like Sci 10 does and all this sort of stuff. And just, you know, refuse to get knocked off the script and keep coming back to it, you know, even though...
That's super frustrating. You can tell it's coming from a script, and it's just like, would you just admit it? Please just admit it. I watched watching Darth Dawkins and T-Jump last night, and Darth like rage quit again, but you could hear it. You could hear how he kept trying to pull the conversation back to that script, and it's just like you just want to reach through the computer sometimes and just smack him a little bit because it's just like
This actually brings me to something that I hadn't put on the list, but it's sort of come up because I was thinking it yesterday and didn't write it down about Kenny, and then about this other one with the, you know, you really believe in God, is that there's a lot of dishonesty that comes from their side. I mean, I thought there was an actual commandment against lying, but they don't seem to have any problem with lying whatsoever if it's done in defense of their cause. Now, I was listening to Jackson Wheat a little while ago. He was on Gonna Go For It, and he was on there as the co-host when they had Erica on, Gutsit Gibbon. And Jackson was talking about the fact that a lot of these guys who are in those debates, the modern day debates, like Nephilim Free, and I can't remember some of the other ones, but he said they've just got a script, and if you can get them off the script, there's no there. They don't actually know any of the science that they're quoting to try and poke holes in science. So, you know, they don't actually know any genetics. So if you can actually get them off of the little bits that they're talking about and onto more general genetics, it just becomes apparent that they don't know anything. And this is the problem. They've got all these talking points that go around. Often they're poking holes at things that are either not well known, or if they're not talking to an expert, if they're talking to somebody more like yourself and myself, we're hard pressed to come up with the counters to it. Whereas if they were talking about genetics to Jackson, he would know the counters because he knows his genetics.
Right. Atheist Pastor said that the other day that he uses, well, Darth Dawkins in particular, uses like a lot of big words and throws a lot of big words together to make himself sound very intimidating. But when you actually call him on the meanings of those things, that he really doesn't know what they mean. And like last night with the debate with T-Jump was like, what you're saying doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I can't answer your question. And like it basically Darth got upset and ended up rage quitting out of the debate. But he's like, it was gibberish. It didn't make any sense. But he was just trying to sound intelligent by putting all these big words together to try and be intimidating.
Yeah, well,
so it's a game basically.
Yeah, T-Jump's a smart guy, so he is.
I enjoy his debate.
Yeah. He was on with Matt Dillahunty doing a team debate the other day about, is it reasonable to believe in God or something like that?
Yes.
And the other side did not argue the point at all. That they didn't even seem to know what the debate was about. And Matt pointed that out on a few occasions. You're not actually answering the questions of the debate.
That seems to be pretty common.
if you have to dodge and lie and all this sort of stuff so much to defend your position, why would you continue to do it?
Because they think they're right, and they think that, they're defending their God. But if your God was so mighty, he wouldn't need you to defend him.
Yeah. Let's be honest. Would a God really need Ray Comfort to fight his corner?
Yeah. Yeah, really.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Oh, Ken Ham. I'm ashamed.
Oh, God. Oh.
I'm ashamed as an Australian citizen to say that Ken Ham is an Australian. It's so bad. But at least we managed to...
Is he from New Zealand?
He's from New Zealand, yeah. So, yeah, we do get... I always say about how great Australia is. I've never been to New Zealand, but, Australia is just a fantastic place to live, but we do still produce some of those idiots, I'm afraid.
Hey, I always like to say the same thing about Canada is we have an awesome country. I love being a Canadian, but sometimes we turn out the dummies. Sorry.
Okay, so moving on to our next thing. There was another tweet of yours I picked up about celebrities and issues. And Ice-T is here saying, I love when people say artists and celebrities shouldn't speak on issues. I've been an activist my whole life. And you replied, artists and celebrities are people just like the rest of us and are entitled to opinions like everyone else. Having a platform that extends beyond what the average person has access to doesn't invalidate that opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
what about all those anti-vax celebrities?
I didn't say that their opinion wasn't valid. They're allowed to have their opinion. Doesn't mean that they're right, though. That's the thing, is that everyone's allowed to have an opinion. It doesn't mean that's the right opinion. What the problem I have is that people think that all of a sudden when you become famous, like say a famous baseball player or, even a singer or whatever you are, that all of a sudden you are only good enough for what it is that you're providing to the community. You're only good because you're a singer. That's it. That's all we want to hear from you. And it dehumanizes them. But these are still real people with valid feelings and valid opinions. And for people to just say, well, you're famous, so you don't count, I don't think that's fair, because then it's so easy to dismiss everybody else for whatever reason, So I don't think we should be dehumanizing somebody just because they're famous. That's not fair.
I think that there's the other side of that, though, where people take more weight from what they're saying because they're famous. And there's some really bad ideas out there being perpetrated by celebrities. I'm not saying that we should stop celebrities talking about this, that baseball players should only talk about baseball and so on, and actors should only talk about acting. I'm not saying that at all. But it worries me that some people evaluate a baseball's players' views on vaccines because they're good at baseball.
Well, I mean, that's your personal call. If you're going to take, look at when Trump was up there and he was talking about drinking disinfectant to help the disease.
You mean that's not a good idea?
No, not at all. He's allowed to have that opinion. It's a stupid opinion. And hopefully people out there are smart enough to say, maybe if I drink this, it's not going to be healthy. But at the same time, he's allowed to have that opinion. It's just a stupid one, right?
I just wish he'd done it. I just wish he'd done it. Do it.
That's the example.
Yes.
But if we say that celebrities can't have opinions and should keep these opinions to themselves, there are people out there that are celebrities that are doing some really, really good things. Like Ashton Kutcher from That 70s Show. He's run a whole campaign into rescuing girls from sex trafficking. It's good that when they use their fame in order to help people. And I want to be able to encourage that. And people by saying, well, you're famous, you don't have a valid opinion, is going to stop that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I just, while you were talking about that, and kind of showing my age here, but one of my great heroes is Peter Gabriel of early Genesis, and obviously a huge solo career fame. And he does a lot of good stuff. A lot of the technology that we have in mobile phones now that sort of scans our health and that sort of stuff, where he was a big driver behind that. He figured some time ago that if medical facilities were going to be available to people all over the world, that it really had to be in mobile technology. And being Peter Gabriel and having the sort of pull he does, he was able to get people like, Kofi Annan and Nelson Mandela and all these sorts of people involved with these sorts of things, and able to, therefore, drive change, because, Kofi Annan stands up and says something, people are going to listen to what he says.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's just kind of one of my own personal pet peeves, is when people say that, oh, well, just because you're famous, you're not important to speak on these issues. That just kind of irks me. Because if I'm famous ever one day, I want people to care about my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, our fifth talking point out of the 6 I've got written down, and we'll see if we'll go elsewhere. I don't know, but this was a tweet from Michael Polkovich. Now, I like a lot of Michael Polkovich's tweets, and if you don't follow him on Twitter, you really should. He's a very, very smart guy, NASA engineer, designs stuff that actually goes into space, and he's
a real rocket scientist, basically.
A real rocket scientist, and he's well known for blocking an awful lot of theists, but as a few, who often complain, oh, that Polkovich guy just blocks us. And, as it's been pointed out, he's a rocket scientist. He finds it really hard to take that level of stupid. He, one of my favorite tweets of his was the one where he talked about they found the original site of the Garden of Eden right next to Jack's beanstalk. And,
that's where it would be.
But this one's a serious one, and he does send these out occasionally. It's not always just his humour. And he's talking about a father who killed 5 children so that they would go to heaven.
I haven't heard that particular story, but unfortunately, I've heard many stories that are very similar. I was actually going to do a video a week or 2 ago on the victims of religion, and it was strictly I had compiled a bunch of stories that I'd found on the internet of children that have been either killed or abused in religious circumstances, and it's really sad. It's really sad, and it's really scary.
Yeah. It does worry me this. Every now and again you come across a story where kids died because the parents were trying to purge them of a demon, and this sort of stuff. I think one of the first cases I actually came across, and there's lots of them, but was Madeline Newman, who had type 1 diabetes. And, the parents and the pastor and all these people were praying when all she really needed was an insulin shot. Yep.
There was a story of a little boy that had a fever, and they just thought, oh, we're going to stay at home and treat him with essential oils. And he died of meningitis because they didn't seek any medical help. They would rather stay home and pray. And then there's actually another, I think it's called Church of Christ. I'm not 100% sure what the name of it was, but there is a whole congregation of people that they will pay someone in this church, the elders of the church, and rather than take their child to a doctor, these people will come into their home and professionally pray for the healing of their children rather than, seek actual medical care. And a lot of these kids die.
I wonder if professional praying works any better than just, regular praying by amateurs.
Apparently not. And the funny thing is they there was a claim made saying that they were professionals in caring for the sick, but none of them had any type of medical training or medical degrees. But they were professionals who knew how to care for the sick, and that included the praying. And there's lots of people out there that believe this is true. And that's scary.
Yeah. That brings us to, faith healing in many ways, because isn't it interesting that so many faith healers have actually closed down their practices during the pandemic?
Oh, absolutely, because they're not really healing anybody.
Yeah.
They don't want their paid actors to get sick.
And the point is that they know they're not really healing anybody. So they're just con men.
Basically, yeah.
And it comes down to the lying again. And I don't know why the theists can't see that these people are charlatans and frauds, and why they don't hold them to account.
Yeah. Because I think that from my experience, a lot of theists are very gullible, because if you can believe something without evidence, then you can believe lots of other things without evidence. So, I mean, I think there's a famous quote that's if you can believe without reason, then you can't be convinced with reason.
Yeah,
I believe that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's true. It just saddens me when I see these cases and these kids. I mean, in this case, these kids are dead, so they're never going to have the opportunity to do anything in their lives. But even the kids who come through these sorts of homes and have the wrong ideas forced into their heads, it's got to limit their life choices. And we all know people who have come out of that and gone on to achieve great things, and they've thrown off those views and have gone on to achieve great things. But I think those people are a minority. I think the majority of people
very much.
Yeah, the majority of people who are brought up in these, Christian homeschooling sort of environments never ever break those shackles, and are stuck in that, not really understanding how the world works.
And you have to wonder what kind of environments they're coming from as well. Like, I'm very thankful that I grew up in a home that had no religion in it, but I also grew up in a home that was very verbally and emotionally abusive. So I was seeking out the kind of attention that the church was willing to give me when I was going. And if I had found a reason to believe, I could have very easily fallen into that. Like, I recognize that now, but I didn't at the time. So you have to wonder how many people actually do fall victim to that, just not because they want to believe, but because they feel like they want to belong somewhere and they want to be important to someone.
Yeah, I guess religion preys on the vulnerable in all sorts of
absolutely
vulnerabilities. Yeah.
Well, just look at Alcoholics Anonymous and how that's tied to belief as well. Like they teach a belief in God, and God's going to save you from your addiction. So they prey on the people that are looking for help in any which way that could be.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so last talking point that I've got written down, things in the news. So first of all, let's deal with COVID, because that seems to have gone out of the news a little bit just recently with other things that's happened. But how is the COVID situation where you are?
Well, I'm right now currently in Pennsylvania hiding from COVID. The area I come from, a border city in Canada, and my in-laws live in rural Pennsylvania. So we've actually been here since March, and we had come down for the March break from school. And just after that, they closed the schools. But my in-laws live in a very small rural area, and out that way is a great big huge cornfield, and out that way is a cow field. So we're very isolated out here. So it just felt like it was safer out here. And in this particular area, the COVID cases are very, very few. The nearest hospital actually hasn't had a COVID case in weeks, which is good. So I'm not as fearful here as I would have been at home in the city.
So that's good. That's good. As I say on almost every show where we discuss this, the situation here in Australia is really quite good. We're still at 102 deaths, I think, when I looked yesterday.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, it's not awesome for the people away, unfortunately, but the fact that number is so low. Absolutely.
And here in Western Australia, I think we had no new cases for quite a lot of the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And when we do get them, it's only the odd one or two. And people are still practicing social distancing. Everybody's still sanitizing before they go to the shops, and standing on the dots in the shops so that they're all apart and all this sort of stuff. Even though there's so few cases.
Are you guys having the same issue with everybody wearing face masks out in public and people resisting that, or?
No, it's not been policy over here for people to wear face masks. Some people do. If they do, they do. Mm. I don't care. I've not seen anybody complaining about people doing that. I have worn one a couple of times myself and not had anybody make any sort of negative comment. So, yeah, I don't think so. I think on the whole, Australians are actually pretty good at obeying instructions. and it's one of the reasons that we've actually seemed to, at least at the moment, we seem to have licked this thing.
Yeah, that's good. It's a completely different story over here, which has been pretty surprising, about all the people that are really, really speaking out about having to wear masks and why do we have to stay home? Why should I care about your health when I'm fine? And it's a very different attitude, very, very different attitude from back home.
Yeah. Yes. I've seen all that stuff, and I've actually done a couple of videos about it, about the, our First Amendment rights. Well, what about the rights of people who might get infected and die because of your actions?
Exactly.
It's not everybody for the individual. Sometimes you have to act in the interest of everybody. The one thing that does actually worry me slightly down here in Australia is that we now got a population of people who still have no immunity to this disease. Mm-hmm. So when we do open up our borders again, we're going to have to be very careful, because we're a population where only a couple of thousand people have actually had the disease, and I still don't know what they're saying about acquired immunity, whether you can get it a second time, and there's various strains.
The whole herd immunity thing, I don't know. I've heard that they've been double testing people that have had it, previously, and it's been like a month or two since they had it, and retesting them to see if, and some people have been diagnosed with it again. And I don't know. I haven't really seen a whole lot of conclusive information on it. They don't really seem to know a whole lot, which is kind of what they've been telling us all along, that, this is new. We don't know how it's going to work. We're trying our best, but we just don't know.
I think New Zealand are even better than us. I think they've had no cases for a long, long time. So they squashed it really well. Mm-hmm. But we do now have populations down here where really without a vaccine, we can't really have travellers coming from other parts of the world where they might be bringing the disease until screening gets a lot better. And you can be sure that the people who are coming have it. I mean, everybody who's getting off a plane here just goes straight into 2 weeks quarantine anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we go back to Canada, whenever they open the borders and we have to go home, we're going to have to quarantine as soon as we get there. Like they'll ask us at the border, what our plans are for quarantine, and that, we're in our house. We are not leaving for 14 days. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job in many places of flattening the curve, although I saw that the US has 116,000 deaths, was the last time I looked, which was yesterday.
Yep. It was over 2 million infected so far. But another problem that I've noticed is that there's a lot of people here that don't even believe that number is real. Oh, it's a hoax. Oh, they're falsifying the testing. That's not real. And there's been so many people that are just kind of brushing it off and saying, well, you're worrying about nothing. It's really not as bad as they tell you it is. It's not that bad. It's not a big deal. And that just seems to be a general attitude around here. Like, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to get sick. It's fine. They're blowing it up. And that's kind of scary. And that's probably why they have so many cases.
Yeah. I think we've got a case here of an emerging virus that's going to kill maybe 2 or 3% of the population, which is a huge number. But there's no reason at all that you couldn't have an emerging virus that kills 60% of the population and is just as infectious as this one.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
that would be a civilization-ending event.
Oh, absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, the US would no longer be a world power if they reacted the same way.
Oh no, not at all. And you know what's scary is about because my brother-in-law is a microbiologist and he's actually in Seattle and he's working with the virus and studying the virus and trying to work on a vaccine. And during the beginning of this, he told us that they don't really understand how easily this virus mutates yet. Because there was actually in Seattle had its own outbreak, and it was a particular strain that was just local to Seattle. And then they were starting to find other strains of the virus that of people that had been outside of Seattle and then bringing it in. So if you think this is a new virus and there's already 2 strains of it, how many more is there going to be? How many times is it going to mutate? And what does that mean for, vaccine development? That's kind of scary.
Yeah. And every new case is a chance for the virus to mutate, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
sorry, there's a little person in the background.
So of course, what's overtaken COVID in the news is the whole Black Lives Matter thing. I'm actually thinking of doing one of my little rants about this, and obviously it would be a serious one and not like the pineapple on pizza or anything like that. It's an observation I made, and Robert Reed said that I got it spot on, so I'll make that observation again. Is that the people who are getting behind Black Lives Matter are the people who actually care about all lives. But this is the one that needs dealing with now, or that we can address now. But to me, and with the community that I'm in, we care about the Black Lives Matter movement, and we've got our own version of that in Australia, where we've got a lot of the Indigenous Australians die in custody and this sort of stuff, a disproportionate amount of them. And so, those are things that we can get out there and protest about. And I don't do a lot of that because I do have some immunocompromised status, and I don't want to be out in crowds particularly. But I certainly do a fair bit of it online. And we're the same people who seem to care about persecution of Christians in China and Mubrik Bala being arrested in Nigeria, and we want women to have equal rights in the Islamic world. And so it's the people who are behind Black Lives Matter that care about all these different issues, whereas, and you've seen the picture that I've got, the people who are saying all lives matter tend to be these sort of Trump-supporting white supremacist, wankers, frankly.
Yep. I had a conversation when the riots and the looting and all that stuff first came out, and it seems to be that conservatives that see Black Lives Matter seem to think that it means only Black Lives Matter, that we're trying to promote just Black lives, and they can't seem to wrap their head around the fact that we're not saying that. We're not, it's all lives. Yes, of course, they do matter. It's just the Black lives right now are the ones that need our help. And they are not, they're not as valued as all the rest of the lives. So that's why it needs our attention. It just doesn't mean that, nobody else's lives matter, but we need to focus on this one right now to make things better, because the ultimate goal is we want everybody to be equal. We want, everyone to have the same opportunities. There was a lady on Facebook today that said that she was no longer supporting Black Lives Matter because she felt like she didn't have to apologize for her white ancestors and what they did. And she didn't feel like, I'm not going to apologize for being white. And I said to her, it's not about apologizing. They don't want apologies. They want change. And that's what we're working towards. And she's like, well, I don't believe that, and I don't want to support it anymore. And it's like, I can't wrap my head around people that don't understand that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's that an apology for people in the past does little good anyway, because, just thinking about the occupation of Australia. Obviously, I'm an Australian citizen, and I've moved here, and I'm clearly not an Indigenous Australian. And the rule at the time when Australia was settled was that a country was only really settled if there were buildings there. And of course, the Indigenous Australians were pretty much people who wandered. So, they live in harmony with the land, if you like, and they used to move from area to area depending on the season, where they knew there was hunting or they knew there was food to be had, and so on. So they didn't build structures, they didn't have buildings, and therefore it was deemed fit for settlement. Something that would not be done now. If you went somewhere and found people were living there, you'd leave them alone, unless you're that Christian missionary that tried to land on that island.
I was just thinking about that exact story, actually. Yeah, or I don't know if you've ever seen the picture of the little small plane that's full of spears underneath of it, of people that tried to get close and take pictures of, tribes that haven't been contacted. And they're like, yeah, we're going to leave these guys alone, because there's just like hundreds of spears stuck to the bottom of this plane. Like, we're going to leave them alone.
Yeah, but I don't think we can apologise for the views that people had in those days. I don't think that does any good. It's like you say.
No.
We now recognise that view was narrow and, not a good view. And we've changed. And I think that's what human beings have to do is try to say, look, this situation is not good. The situation in the past has been bad. We need to move forward from this point and try to make things better. And I think that's what we do.
Yep. And that seems to be a big message that the other side of this argument seems to be missing.
Yeah. I think as individuals, we try to do that as well when, we all fuck up at some stage. And if you feel bad about that, then the thing is, well, I'll try to do that better in the future. And I think that we have to do that as societies as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's how evolution happens for us, really, right? Because we grow and we learn and we change and we become better. And, I don't see how people can see that as a bad thing. Change seems to scare a lot of people, yeah. Conservative people anyway.
To me, that seems like what is better for society. Coming back to Kenny Boma, the whole idea that we can see things in the past where society didn't function well, and we'd like our society to function better in the future, and we can take steps towards that. And it's true, it's not going to be a straight path or a clear path, and there's probably going to be somebody say you can't get a naught from a niz or any of that sort of stuff to do with this. But the point is, just because you can't get a naught from a niz doesn't mean you can't say the situation is this. We should do something to try and improve it. And it's like Sam Harris's landscape, the moral landscape. And
another thing is they seem to be very dismissive that if you don't have the answers of how to make it better right now, then you're invalid. Like, if you come out and say, well, this is a problem. Okay, well, then how do you want to fix it? You can't fix it? Okay, then I guess we can't fix it. It's like we don't have all the answers. We have to figure it out as we go, and we have to figure out how to do it better. But just because we don't have all the answers right this very second doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I think one thing that could be fixed pretty quickly is to try to move to a situation where the police force do what they're supposed to do, which is protect society. They're there to protect our society, not to be judge, jury, and executioner as they were with George Floyd. And they're part of the legal system. And my personal belief is if there was more equality and fairness in our society, the police would actually have an easier job anyway, because there'd be less crime. But when people do commit a crime, it's their job to bring them into the justice system, not to actually carry out a sentence.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the scary thing is everyone says, well, there's only a handful of bad cops out there. There's only, you're labeling all cops as bad. But what's happening with these looting and riots and things like that is we're seeing a lot of video of a lot of bad cops. We're seeing them, hurting people, shooting unarmed crowds, and leaving piles of bricks on, in an alleyway for people to find, or leaving piles of rocks in front of big stores that have glass windows and stuff in it. And it makes you wonder, like, if there is good cops out there, then why aren't they stopping the bad cops from doing these things that we are catching on camera? And it's like there's a lot more bad cops out there than I personally realized, because I thought, okay, yeah, there's going to be a corrupt cop here or there. How many can there really be? And then you just see video that's been taken out of people protesting, and you're like, wow, this is a lot worse than what I understood. And that's scary, because these are people that are supposed to protect us.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain amount of psychometric testing that should be done before people are allowed to be police officers. And
absolutely.
People who do have racist views and extreme views probably shouldn't be given a gun and a taser and sent out on the streets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's scary to think that, a police officer can have that attitude and then be allowed to carry a weapon that can kill you.
Yeah. I saw somebody holding a placard the other day that was saying that hairdressing school actually has more hours of training than police school.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to have more experience. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's really scary, and it wonders, you wonder what kind of system that is, and why people are pushing to have not to have a change.
Yeah. Did you see the video of the old man that got pushed over?
And then the tweets that came from Trump afterwards, I was furious. That made me really upset, because before I had my daughter, I worked in geriatrics. I was, the U.S. would see it as a nursing aide, but I was a PSW. And that was my main job, as I was taking care of the daily needs of the elderly in retirement homes. So I have a very soft spot for the older generation. So to see a cop just like full out push him down, and, he hit the ground really hard that he was bleeding a lot away. And then they all just kind of walked past him. It was just like, how can you call yourself a good person when you see that happen and not do anything about it? How do you sleep at night with that happening? I don't understand. Yeah.
I've heard other ones. I saw a video with sort of 9 and 10-year-olds being maced, and it's just crazy, using pepper spray on kids and shooting rubber bullets into people. I heard of a pregnant woman who got hit in the stomach with a rubber bullet.
Yep.
It's
like, how do you go out and do that and then sleep at night? How do you live with yourself treating other people like that?
Yeah, and the protests wouldn't be happening at all if people were being treated equally in the first place.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
the police weren't using unreasonable force. I mean, if somebody's shooting at the police, I don't blame them for getting their guns out and shooting back.
Right. But an unarmed crowd of protesters with their hands in the air deserve to get shot? No, I'm sorry. That's not okay.
No. And arresting somebody using a level of force that was completely, inappropriate for the situation is just, that has to stop. They had the guy under control. Why did he? I saw it on TV, and I was just like, what the fuck is going on there? I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, that somebody would do that to somebody else.
Yeah, it breaks your heart.
Yeah. Anyway.
I'm sorry, I have the 5-year-old and the dog on my leg right now. So it's just like, I'm trying to keep them as quiet as possible.
I come to record, I come into a room where the cats can't get in. But otherwise, I've got one Ginger, and if you've ever had a Ginger cat, would be across this keyboard like boom, 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 boom. With the zoomies for the whole time.
Normally my husband is here to keep her occupied while I'm recording. It's just today he got a new drum set and he's trying out for this band, and he was like, okay, peace out, I'm gone. I'm like, oh no, I did not know this.
So he's the drummer.
He is a drummer. Yeah, he's a drummer and a guitarist.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
because my joke is always, what do you call somebody who hangs out with musicians? A drummer.
I don't. I have to tell him that joke when he gets home. See what he says.
Don't tell him I told you. Okay, so it seems like a good point to stop then, since you've got to go on doggy and kitty duties.
I've got to wrangle, yes, animals and child.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll do this again at some stage, maybe over on your channel.
Absolutely. I had a great time.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
me
much for
too.
having me.
No, it's great, Mindy. Yeah, I thought this would be a good conversation, and indeed it was.
Yes, awesome. So do you know how long it'll take you to edit it and get it up?
I'll probably get it up in the next couple of days.
Okay, awesome. Well, then just send me the link when it's up, and I will post it everywhere.
Okay, I will do that.
Awesome. Well, it was very nice to meet you, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.